Hi everybody, Creative Katie Karen Burchill here. Welcome to another Technique Tidbit video. In these Technique Tidbits, I showcase one art journaling mixed media technique, giving you the step-by-step instructions, sharing with you what I've learned along the way. So let's get started. So I am pulling out prompts from my art journal prompt and process cards. These are the steps and techniques that we use to do our pages. Now, normally smooshing is done with watercolor paint, distressed inks, but I'm going to do it with acrylic paint. Here are a couple examples that I have. Now, you don't need to have inks, and one of the reasons that I'm choosing to use acrylic paint is that it's permanent. More about that later. So, in order to do this, I prefer having a gesso surface. So I've given this a gessoed surface. Normally you take the paper and you flip it upside down and you tap it into the ink or watercolor and it gets on the pages. But because I'm doing a book, I'm going to put the acrylic paint, the medium, on this acetate. This is just excess from packaging. Now, I always thin the paint. How much? Well, that depends. The more water you have, the more watery it is, the lighter the color. So you're going to have to play with that and do what you want. You can do one color with different levels of water. So once you've thinned it, and I like to put paint on the palette, put a little bit at a time, you're simply going to turn it upside down and press or smoosh. Now, if you press hard, you're going to get a bigger splotch. If you press lightly, you'll get less. I got a big blob here, but remember, right now, in the way I'm using this is part of the background, so it's not done. So don't panic. I'm tapping into some of the wet paint here and bringing it on others, and when I run out of paint, I'm just mixing more on my acetate sheet. And that's basically smooshing. Now, I started saying, why would you want to smoosh with acrylic paint? Well, one, you don't need every color medium. And two, acrylic paint is permanent when dry. And later down the road, I'm going to show you where that comes in handy. But I like to have my backgrounds completely permanent because it's just going to make my life easier. Now I'm switching colors here to purple, but I have not dried the red that I've already smooshed on there. And that's because I know that purple and red together, when they mix wet into wet, it's not going to make mud. It's going to layer nicely, give me a second or third color that is going to be pleasing. But if I was doing purple and orange, I would want to dry in between. And if you're unsure if you're going to get a pleasing color, all you have to do is mix a little bit of it together on the side and you'll get your answer. You get a color you don't like, you dry in between. So here I'm just smooshing on the purple. Now I love smooshing because you get a very organic feel. And I hate smooshing because you get a very organic feel. You're going to have to give up a little bit of control because sometimes when you smoosh, you get something that you don't particularly like. But over time, I've embraced the grungy, the unexpectedness, because that truly gives you unique backgrounds. So I've smooshed everything here, the two colors. I also like smooshing because you get that white space in there. And I really struggle with keeping my white space. Now I'm doing it on this book and it's uneven. The pages have been glued together. So that affects how the smooshing looks as well. If I was doing it on a flat piece of paper, which I will later on in another demo, then I had the idea, what would happen if I smooshed on an already painted surface, not the blank page. So this had some color on it, and then I've scraped gesso on it to mute it down, and now I'm going to do smooshing. I'm going to put the paint off on the palette off to the side, mix it with water on the acetate, and smoosh. And I'm going to keep the colors that are here, and it's a bit of an experiment to see if I like it. Because everything is permanent underneath, if I make a mistake, I can grab a baby wipe or a wet cloth and wipe it off. If the smoosh is absolutely unbearable, you can do that. But embrace the organic, the unexpected, and see where that can take you. It's less predictable, but open that door to that, and you'll find you're going to be pleasantly surprised. I know I was. So here I've added the yellow green, and now I'm going to add some turquoise color. So I'm mixing. Now, if you mix a little bit, you're going to end up with smaller blobs. If you mix up a larger bit, you're going to end up with bigger blobs. So another thing you can play with and see what effect you get. You could turn the book upside down and put the paint on your craft mat, and I'm going to demo that in a bit with another piece. And again, do what gives you the effect that you like. So I'm really liking the smooshing on top of what was an already painted surface. And I'm thinking, why have I never thought of this before? So here I'm adding a little bit more paint, smooshing, and it's making an interesting background. I could be doing this on a collage sheet, which is where my mind goes now. So when I start creating, sometimes I get creative ideas. So here's that finished page once it's all dried. And again, I didn't stop in between to dry because the colors are going to work together. So this is a gel print that I had in my stash that I pulled. It's interesting, but it needs a little something something. So it's on the add something to this pile. So I thought, okay, what would happen if I smooshed on top of the gel print? So we have acrylic paint there, but where it's white, it's pretty much raw paper. So here I'm smooshing on some red oxide on top. I'm grunging it up because I've learned that I do like grungy backgrounds. They make the best. Now here, I didn't like what I saw, so I'm trying to wipe it up, but where there is no gesso, I can't wipe it up because it's soaked right into the paper, as you see. But I'm undeterred. I'm just going to continue on because this is just the first or second or third layer, right? My background isn't done. So that got very watery. So I'm playing with the water here, but it's making a very soft color. You can see the colors coming and whatever was underneath it. So I'm not unhappy with that. So when you do attempt to do smooshing with acrylic paints, play with it. Play with how much you're thinning the paint. Play with gessoed surface or not. Play with painted surfaces and doing it at different stages of the art journal process. So here I'm just putting it on the craft mat. I've taken the dark turquoise, dark blue, and I'm adding water and I'm just turning the paper upside down, which is the way you see when they do the distress inks or watercolor. But I can easily do that because this is a flat sheet of paper. It's easily manipulated. You have even less control about where it goes, but I'm embracing that. So I'm just dabbing on. Now I did dry it in between because that red oxide with the blue is going to make brown, and I really didn't want to go there too much. So this is just a silicone mat. This isn't a craft mat underneath, but in here I've got darker blue, and so we just by adding more water or less water, I'm getting a very different look. But if you are smooshing, thinning it down some is important. But I'm really loving what's happening here. Now I'm going back to adding more of the red oxide. You can switch back and forth the colors as you go. You can even put more than one color on the craft mat or silicone mat before you smoosh. And I'm thinking, oh, I think I'm going to be doing a lot more of my gel prints that need a little something, something. Smooshing, when I have leftover paint, I think that's what I might be doing a little bit more of. So I'm adding blue, and I'm thinking this is an interesting background that I may use as an Insta background on an art journal page, on a tag, on an ATC. And I'm just giving that a dry. So there is the smooshing on top of the gel print, and there's the other half of the gel print. So you get a before and after. I think we've made a definite improvement. But let's go back and now finish that page, because whether it's the first step in the art journal process or the third, you aren't just doing the one technique. So as promised, I keep the finishing of the page simple. And here I'm just stamping with black acrylic paint and my dot stamp just to add some contrast to the background. This also breaks up the smooshing. Now, if I make a mistake here, because the smooshing is acrylic paint, it is permanent. I can come in and wipe back any mistake without affecting or destroying my background because it's permanent. Wet medium isn't going to change it. So now I found a simple sentiment from my Down the Garden Path sentiment pack, and I'm just going to glue it. Now here I'm using fluid matte medium, and I don't have to worry because the smooshing is all permanent. It's acrylic paint, it's permanent. So I like to take all those techniques that they use with their inks and their dyes and the watercolor and try to use acrylic paint, because then I only need one medium and it's permanent. So here I'm edging with black acrylic paint. And again, if I was doing this and the smooshing was done with Distress Oxide, I would be reactivating it and smearing it. So I couldn't edge my page in the way that I'm doing it. I would have to alter the steps, and I simply want it more simple. So here I'm taking my liner brush, thinning some black paint, and just painting over my printable. Sometimes when you print out with the printer, you don't get as dark as you want it, but this is an option. You can always overpaint to get the level of opacity that you want, the darkness that you want. I'm going to keep my sentiment or my focal image white again. I don't want to get into doing too much complicated stuff with the sentiments or the focal images for the Technique Tidbit. The bulk of the video, the Technique Tidbit series, is always going to be about the technique. Here I'm just shading around the sentiment to make it stand out. So here we've come to the time in the video where I'm just going to invite you, if you have an art journal technique that you would like me to cover in one of these Technique Tidbit videos, if I'm able, if I have that skill set, if I know how to do it, I am more than happy to take suggestions. Shading on the flower a little bit. Then I grab my Posca pen and I'm just doing a kind of a dash dot dot dot, dash dot 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 around my page. So smooshing is a very easy technique. You do have to embrace and let go of the control because you don't always have the control. But if you allow yourself, you're going to come up with some great backgrounds. So let's finish this one. This one we did on some colored paper, and I'm just going to finish it different because I want to show and demo what else you can do. So here I'm taking white acrylic paint and a stencil, and I'm just stenciling over top of it. And the smooshing with the background color makes a perfect background for it. So when you look at this one, it doesn't read, oh my, she used smooshing technique, but it was the only way we could get this kind of background, this organic background that I absolutely, absolutely love. So whether you stencil with white or stamp with black or any other color that you choose, don't be limited by the choices that I've made. Smooshing at any stage of the art journal page is a great technique to use. If you do this technique or any of the techniques on here, please come to my art journaling mixed media group, Art Journaling and Mixed Media on Facebook. Join and share what you've done. We all can learn from each other. And there, look at that. Love, love, love that background, the colors. We'll be doing that. And here's the other one that we've done. So 2 different examples, doing it in 2 different stages of the art journaling. And there's the other one that we did on the gel print. Oh, I can't tell you how I love that. Until next time, you go get creative and try this technique.